Boy, I hate being wrong. I really hate being wrong. I mean, I'm wrong as often as you guys are, but it bothers me. I'm one of these anal perfectionist kind of guy. Once upon a, this has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about, but once upon a time in Chicago, I had to do a radio controversy, a dialogue with a minister on pornography. I, of course, was pro, and he was anti, of course. And somewhere in the middle of the conversation, I was talking about the fine points of this problem, and I said, the minutiae of this situation, and he and the host looked at me, and they said, the what? And I said, you know, the minutiae, the small, and they said, do you mean minutia? Well, I'd never heard anybody say it. I'd seen it written, and of course I didn't speak Latin, so I didn't know the word was minutia, and I said yes, and I felt like such a jerk. That's why when we began these commentaries, I told you that I would tell you when I was wrong, and if you caught me out at it. And this is not strictly speaking I was caught out wrong, but I come very late to something called Quantum Leap. And Quantum Leap, I just never watched it very much when it was on network. Now it's on the USA Network, which oddly enough is the parent outfit of the Sci-Fi Channel. And I want you to understand that this is not a hype for them. They didn't ask me to do this. I come to do this to talk about Quantum Leap because I caught a wonderful episode in rerun the other day on USA Network. It was about, it's where Scott, I guess it's Bakula, is that the way it's pronounced? Scott Bakula goes back to the 50s and finds himself a member of the Ku Klux Klan and doesn't want to be and has to teach his son that bigotry and racism are bad. And I watched this hour, even in its edited, what they call stripped form, and it was absolutely astonishing. I thought it was one of the best lessons I had ever seen given on television about something like racism and bigotry, which is so deeply ingrained that most people suffer from it and don't even know. And I had begun watching Quantum Leap during the last season and was very much impressed by it. I'm sorry it's gone. I'm really sorry it's gone. And I'll tell you why, not so much for the story. Stories can be told in almost any format. But today, very few people have a sense of time. They have a very small sense of tick-tock, tick-tock. What they have a sense of is right here and right now. It's as if the world began this morning and will end tonight. They don't understand that they are all linked into a long chain that goes all the way back to the dawn of time and goes all the way forward to the end of time. And so they're careless and they're callous and they litter and they hurt each other and they do all the stuff that you're advised by all the best religions not to do. And here was Quantum Leap, this show that said time is a mesh and you are trapped in that mesh. And it goes on forever, and what you do has repercussions, and you are not alone. You are not alone in that boat going down the river. And I guess I'm sorry to see a show that has that serious and wonderful a point gone. And so, like a dolt, I come late to say, goodbye, Quantum Leap, and stay in syndication and rerun forever, because the human race really needs it. A man came to me with fabulous paintings. Jim Cowan, the publisher at Morpheus, for whom I had done an introduction to the H.R. Giger book, came to me and he said, I've come upon a little Polish artist named Jacek Jurka. He lives with his family in the woods, and he paints. And they're wonderful paintings, and I'm going to do a book of them, 30 of them. Will you do the introduction? And I said, I'm up to here with doing introductions. I'm really tired of it. And then I said, let me look at the paintings, and he let me look at them. And they took my breath away. They seemed to me to be an astonishing meld of Magritte and Dali and dreamers and surrealists down through the years. And I said to Jim Cowan, no, I won't do an introduction, but I will write one story around each painting. One of these little paintings I called Susan, and I wrote it about my wife and about my marriage. I'm going to read you a story. The story is from Mindfields. You'll see the illustration around which I wrote the story. And the story, like my wife's name, is called Susan. As she had done every night since they had met, she went in bare feet in a cantaloupe meat-colored night shift to the shore of the Sea of Mist, the verge of the ocean of smothering vapor, the edge of the bewildering haze he called the brim of obscurity. Though they spent all of their daytime together, at night he chose to sleep alone in a lumpy Volkswagen-shaped bed at the southernmost boundary of the absolutely lovely forest in which their home had been constructed. There, at the border between the verdant woods and the brim of obscurity that stretched on forever, a sea of fog that roiled and swirled itself into small, murmuring vortexes from which depths one could occasionally hear something like a human voice pleading for absolution, or at least a back-scratcher to relieve this awful itch. He had made his bed, and there, with the nightlight from his old nursery, and his old vacuum tube radio that played nothing but big band dance music from the 1920s, and a few favorite books, and a little fresh fruit he had picked on his way from the house to his resting place, he slept peacefully every night, except for the nightmares, of course. And as she had done every night for the 8 years since they had met, she went barefoot and charmed down to the edge of the sea of fog to kiss him good night. That was their ritual. That was their rite. Before he had even proposed marriage, he explained to her the nature of the problem. Well, the curse, really. Not so much a problem, because a problem was easy to reconcile. Just trim a little nub off here, just smooth that plane over there, just let this bit dangle here, and it'll all meet in the center. No, it wasn't barely remotely something that could be called problem. It was a curse, and he was open about it from the first. "My nightmares come to life," he had said, which remark thereupon initiated quite a long and detailed conversation between them. It went through all the usual stages of good-natured chiding, disbelief, ridicule, short-lived anger, at the possibility he was making fun of her, you see, toying with her, on into another kind of disbelief, argument with recourse to logic and Occam's razor, grudging acceptance, a brief lapse into incredulity, a return to the barest belief, and finally, with trust, utter acceptance that he was telling her nothing less than the truth. Remarkably, to say the least, his nightmares assumed corporeal shape and stalked the night as he slept, dreaming them up. It wouldn't have been so bad except... my nightmares killed and ate my first 4 wives, he had said. He'd saved that part for the last. But she married him nonetheless, and they were extremely happy. It was a terrific liaison for both of them. But just to be on the safe side, because he loved her very, very, very much, he took to sleeping in the lumpy Volkswagen bed at the edge of the forest. And every morning, because he was compelled to rise when the sunlight struck his face out there in the open, he would trek back to their fine home in the middle of the forest, and he would make her morning tea and heat and butter a muffin, or possibly pour her a bowl of banana nut crunch cereal, or sometimes a nice bowl of oatmeal with cinnamon or brown sugar sprinkled across the surface, and carry it into her as she sat up in bed reading or watching the home shopping channel. And for 8 years she had been absolutely safe from the nightmares that ripped and rent and savaged everything in sight. He slept at the brim of obscurity, and he was a danger to no one but himself. And whatever means he used to protect himself from those dark time sojourners, well, it was an armory kept most secret. And that was how they lived for 8 years. And every night she would go barefoot in her shift, and she would follow the 27 plugged-together extension cords, each one 30 feet long, that led from the house to his night light, and she would come to him and kiss him goodnight. And they would tell each other how happy they were together, how much every moment together meant to them, and they would kiss goodnight once more, and she would go back to the house. And he would lie reading for a time and then go to sleep. And in the night, there at the shore of fog, at the edge of the awful sea of mist, the nightmares would come and scream and tear at themselves, but they never got anywhere near Susan, who was safely in her home. So as she had done every night since they had met, she followed the extension cords down through the sweet-smelling, wind-cooled hedges and among the whispering, mighty trees to his bed. The light was on. An apple ready to be nibbled sat atop a stack of books awaiting his attention. The intaglio of a tesseract, or possibly a dove on the wing, lay in the center of a perfectly circular depression in his pillow where he had rested his head. But the bed was empty, and she went looking for him. And after a time, she found him sitting on the shore of fog, looking out over the brim of obscurity. But she heard him crying long before she saw him. The sound of his deep, heartfelt sobbing led her to him. And she knelt beside him, and he put his arms around her, and she said, "I see now that I've made you unhappy. I don't know how, but I can see that I've come into your life and made it unpleasant. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry."
But he shook his head and continued to shake it, to say, no, that isn't it. You don't understand. I'm so sorry, she kept saying, because she didn't understand what it meant, his shaking his head like that, until finally he was able to stop crying long enough to say, no, that isn't it. You don't understand. Well, then what are you crying about? And he wasn't able to tell her for a while, because just trying to get the words out started him up all over again. But after a while, still holding her, there at the brim of obscurity, which in an earlier time had been known as the rim of oblivion, he said softly, I'm crying for the loss of all the years I spent without you, the years before I met you, all the lost years of my life, and I'm crying that there are less years in front of me than all those lost years behind me. And out in the roiling ocean of misty darkness, they could both hear the sound of roving, demented nightmares whose voices were now, they understood, less filled with rage than with despair.
When we call him award-winning, that's an understatement. Harlan has won more awards for his 58 books, more than 1,100 stories, articles, essays, and columns than any other living fantasist. His film criticism has been appearing for the last 8 years in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and like our commentaries here, is called Harlan Ellison's Watching.
I now take my Harlan Ellison, the critic cap, and I put it on, and I go back to one of the previous commentaries that I made in which I said that I was for hire. You know, send me your goods, send me your poor, your huddled masses of goods, and I would advertise them for you on the Sci-Fi Buzz commentary. Well, in fact, everybody has just been wonderful. You've sent me some of the most useless, worthless, and offensive trash I have ever seen. However, a few good things have stuck to my fingers. For instance, this absolutely beautiful Captain Marvel Shazam Lightning Bolt shirt, which was sent to me by a company called Graffiti. Every month, they issue T-shirts. They've got comic T-shirts of the Max and of Shadowhawk. They also do the Doc Savage posters. And here's the Sandman T-shirt. Very, very nice T-shirt for those of you who follow the Sandman. Okay, that takes care of that. Now, this is interesting. You're going to love this. The camera's going to come in on this. There's a company called Dynacom, D-Y-N-A-C-O-M-M, and Dynacom has just issued something absolutely terrific. They have issued 2 sets, stick with me, camera, 2 sets of trading cards of the artwork of Kelly Freas. Now, Kelly Freas is the cover artist who has done covers for, I don't know, 40 years or more. A while ago, I mentioned to you a reference book on science fiction and fantasy. Every once in a while, they do an encyclopedia. I'll take the hat off now. You know who I am. They do an encyclopedia of science fiction. Many years ago, they did this book, 1979. This was the Science Fiction Encyclopedia, which was edited by Peter Nichols. There is a new edition of it. But in the meantime, between that one and this one, there was in 1988, Professor James Gunn did the new Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. And Jim Gunn is a very, very fine man. And my entry is spectacular because it was written by a writer who knew something about me. And in fact, gee, how's that for amazing? I actually opened to my own ugly face. And it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not terrific. It's got a lot of errors. It's got a lot of stuff. It's outdated. But the book that you must get, absolutely, it hasn't been published over here yet, except in a very limited hardcover edition, which is what this is. It's being published by St. Martin's, who picked it up from England. This is the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. This is the update by Peter Nichols and one of the most outstanding critics in the field, John Clute. And this is the killer. Now, there are errors in this one, but they are so conscientious that they've already issued, before it comes out in trade paperback in this country, they've already issued new data, typographical errors, factual corrections, and miscellanea. You get this along with the book. That's how conscientious they are. There's entire selections on Frankenstein, on flying saucers, on The Fly, Food of the Gods, Forbidden Worlds, Islands, Lloyd Arthur Eschbach, Eschatology. I get 2.5 pages in here. I love it. And it's correct, except for a few small errors. They do, for instance, make an error with Alan Brennert, and they say that his wonderful book, Kindred Spirits, is a juvenile. It is not. It's an adult novel. This is a terrific book for you to get, the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. It'll be out in trade paperback sometime a little later this year. Now, I have done that job. I get to keep this book, and I don't have to spend the $75. You see, you thought I was kidding when I told you, critics make out, we make out. The entire line of chorus girls from the Sands came knocking at my home door just last night. And all would have gone well, except my wife beat the crap out of them. You know, getting old. It's not so bad. As Chevalier said, old age doesn't seem so bad when you consider the alternative. But the older I get, the more I think about the arrogance of youth. I've discussed that with you before. Many of you are young, and many of you are almost as arrogant as I. That's how it always gets me crazy when you get upset about how arrogant I am, and then I look at you, and you're even more arrogant than I am, and you're dumber than I am, and you're more arrogant about that. Well, the reason that I mention it is there's a group of young men and one not so old man, not so young man, who have formed a comic company called Image Comics. Now, the people in this group, there's 6 of them, I believe. Actually, there's 7, Ellison. And each one is the boss. There's Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson and Mark Silvestri and a few others. And Jim Valentino is the old guy of the bunch. I think he's, gee, I don't know, maybe he's in his 40s. The others, I think, have all just reached puberty. And they're making millions and millions of dollars. I think that it's very fine that they're doing this, because in the history of comic books, the major companies always ripped off the artists, always kept them poor, killed them with deadlines. They didn't own their own properties. All they were beanfield hands. So here are these guys who've taken the bull by the horns, to coin a brand new phrase, and they're making themselves a terrific big living. The only problem with it is they really don't know squat. They're dumb. In all the gin joints in all the world, a sour apple like you had to walk in, Ellison. What are you ashamed of yourself? Just because you never got to be a rock star like Rob Liefeld? I saw Rob Liefeld in the lobby at the San Diego Comic-Con. Didn't you see him? He had a lot of pretty young girls following him. He had a brush cut. He was wearing those jeans that he did the ad. He made millions on the jeans. He's working for Spielberg now. What's the matter with you? Sour grapes? But they're so arrogant because they're making so much money, they don't care. They go ahead and they act in the way that children act without being responsible. For instance, there's a guy named, was it Todd McFarlane who did it, or Jim Lee? I think it was Todd McFarlane. He had all the pages of one of the comics that he does. This is a comic called Spawn, quite a good comic in terms of visuals. And he laid them all out, and he invited some people into his studio, and he said, look, and he shuffled them. He said, look, you can shuffle them any way you want, and they still make sense. Yeah, they still make sense if they didn't make sense to begin with. Come on, Ellison, be real. William Burroughs did the same thing. Took a novel, threw it up in the air, reformed it. It's art. Art, Ellison. And that's the problem. These guys are pretty good artists, but they're awful storytellers. And they're too arrogant to know that. They just don't know any better. They're just young, and they don't care. Money can only take you so far. Well, I don't know. They're making so much money. What are you, sour grapes, Ellison? You don't like how much money they're making? You want them to stay beanfield hands? And when the vogue passes, then you got to have something to back it up. And if you're dumb as ditch water to begin with, you wind up dumb at the end, too, but broke.
Sci-Fi Buzz has been on the air almost a year now, and believe it or not, Harlan Ellison and I have never met. Sure, he's been our resident commentator for months, but we've never been at the same place at the same time until we both found ourselves here in San Diego at Comic-Con. So I decided I was going to get this guy's autograph.
How long is the wait for this?
It's approximately an hour.
An hour?
Yes, sir.
To get Harlan's autograph?
Yes, sir.
Are you sure this is Harlan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have to buy anything?
They're taking advance orders on his new book.
Oh, you gotta buy his book too?
Yes, sir.
Oh no.
Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. I've got to stand in line for an hour just to meet the guy? I wonder if all these people have really read all of Harlan's 58 books. Hey, I'm a TV host. Maybe I can cut this line. Yeah, and get killed by hundreds of Harlan fans? Come on, Harlan. Do you have to tell every fan a short story? Gee, what if he sees me and wants to tear my head off? Here goes nothing.
Horrible, not Mike Jarrett, no!
Can I have your autograph?
My God, it isn't...
Good. I mean, I had to wait in line almost an hour to get your autograph.
Did you?
Yeah.
You lie. You lie.
Could I have...
Ladies and gentlemen, this is an historic meeting. This is the equivalent of Attila the Hun meeting Pope Leo at the gates of Rome.
I would be Pope Leo.
I get to be Attila. The nice thing about doing these commentaries is that I can indulge my arrested adolescent behavior. The other nice thing is that the people at the Sci-Fi Channel, now you'll notice I actually used the phrase sci-fi. Most of the time my tongue gets tangled and I can't do it. But they're very nice to me. They almost never tell me what to say or how to say it. Occasionally they'll kill a commentary or two, but for the most part they let me go my own way. However, recently they got a couple of letters. They got a letter from a young man, a preteen, in Enid, Oklahoma. They got another one from another young boy in Washington, D.C. And these letters were sent to the network for me, and they responded to a commentary I had done some while ago on trading cards. I'm a collector of trading cards, have been for years and years. I have a large collection, and I enjoy them. And these kids said in these letters that they had bought a certain box of trading cards. And the kids said it was a 180 card set, and out of 360 cards, they had not been able to make a set. And these boxes are not inexpensive, folks. These boxes can cost anywhere from, I mean, if you get them at a bargain price, say $25, $30, but usually they're up around $45, even $50 for hot ones with a lot of prism cards in it. But one assumes if one buys a box of cards with a 180 run, that one will get one complete set, at least. Well, these kids wrote and said the series that they had bought was from Skybox. And Skybox had put out their latest Marvel Universe set. This is Marvel Universe 4. This is the 4th series of Marvel Universe cards that have been done. And in this box, they said they had missed as many as 60 cards. So I went out and I bought some boxes. And I want to show you exactly what happened. I managed to get that's duplicates. What we're talking about here in this Skybox set was out of 360 cards, I got 239 duplicates. I was missing 60 cards. Now this was not just here. I checked with dealers around the country, and I found 4 others who said the same thing. So I called Skybox. Now let me stop for a second. Every company that I've talked to, I've asked them how they collate, because the whole secret is in collation. How do they get the cards in so that you get a decent run? They won't tell you. Apparently the biggest secret in trading cards is not who's going to do what product or how they get a card etched or where chromium comes from. It's how do you do the collation. The collation is the key. And they have this 800 number, which I'm going to give you now. If you buy any Skybox cards and you don't get enough of what you need, you can call 1-800-424-6735. That's 1-800-424-6735. Well, the whole thing with comic cards right now is that there has been an enormous implosion in the sports card market. So all those people who were over there in the sports cards, finding they were losing money, have now gotten into comic cards. And they do not understand that there is a different mentality among comic collectors than there is among sports card collectors. And as a result, they take, I feel, a very arrogant attitude about whether you get a complete run or not. Now, this may be a small thing by comparison to starvation of children in Somalia, by comparison to the rise of fascism and skinheads. Absolutely. But we're not talking about that right now. What we're talking about is trusting kids, naive kids, young kids, going in and plunking down their money, however much they may get, however much they may earn, to get what they think is going to be a box of cards with their favorite comic character on it. And they don't get it. Is it not a tragedy that they're missing 1 out of 180? That's a tragedy. Because kids trust. And when you abuse that trust, somebody has to say, stop it. Like a thunder crack,
We have had our first little seismic problem on this show. My commentaries about women writing in the field have naturally brought some interesting comments. And more interestingly than anything else is that all of the comments are from women, about women. In the process, we showed a number of books. Many of them, published by Baen Books, were written by Mercedes Lackey in collaboration with another woman. It was a daisy chain of writers who came off Mercedes Lackey's books. Now, when we did a follow-up, this letter was read on the follow-up to my initial comments in May. This one was done in June 27th, on the June 27th broadcast. And this letter was written by a very well-known, well-established, highly credentialed woman writer who was talking about not being able to say anything about other women who wrote badly because she didn't want to make any missteps in the name of sisterhood. And she asked that her identity be kept secret. And it was a very intelligent letter. My producer, in editing for time, because I ran over, I was shooting my mouth off too long, left out a very significant paragraph. The paragraph that was left out was this: the risk of being churlish, the complaints have to be taken another few steps. A good many of these saccharine collaborations are package deals. The names I name, because I've heard them speak with great pride of their activities, are Bill Fawcett and Jim Baen, both of whom have unctuous contempt for the authors they work with and the reader consumers who buy their books. Fawcett thinks he's doing everyone a favor when he gets a lesser-known writer to flesh out a better-known writer's second-rate outline. Baen's been a gimmick freak since he hit New York in the 70s. Bill and Jim have waxed eloquent that this woman, in doing an anthology, had wasted too much time trying to get good stories and good writers. They insisted the best way to milk the cash cow was not to worry about quality. Superficial fantasies with bright, shiny people sold better than anything serious or thoughtful. Now, this is the opinion of a very highly respected writer. And thereafter, into Dick Crew Productions, the producers of this show, came a fax letter from Mercedes Lackey. It said, on the broadcast of June 27th, Harlan Ellison quoted extensively from a letter whose author he would not reveal. I would very much like to know who wrote that letter. Let me pause. You could put bamboo slivers under my fingernails, folks. You will never learn where I get my information if the person asks me not to. That is sacrosanct. It's as if this is truly the genuine article, and it was. My publisher's colleagues and I just want to know whose hand is holding the dagger that just got shoved in my back. Well, first of all, there was no dagger shoved in anybody's back. It was a serious comment about work. Not people, work. Not the writers, but the writing. And if we cannot be open to this kind of criticism, what are we? Some sort of gods living on an Olympian mountaintop? The weirdest part is these statements seem based on the completely unfounded assumption that I have literary aspirations. It's rather like slamming Beatrix Potter for not writing like Franz Kafka. No, in fact, you were not slammed for having literary aspirations. You were slammed for writing badly. That's exactly what it was. I called Mercedes Lackey, and she's probably watching this right now, and I said to her, send me a statement, if you will, expressing your viewpoint. And this is what she wrote. The collaborations that my protégés and I have done have all been with the purpose of combining a leg up on the marketplace with acquiring the few tools that I can give them. We each put in an equal amount of work. The idea is that after a book, 2 at the most, they are to go out and continue developing their own voices and careers. In the case of Holly Lyle, at least, this succeeded. She won the Compton Crook Award this year and is up for the Campbell Award, all on the basis of her own book, Fire in the Mist. I have hope for all the others. Now, that is what Mercedes Lackey says. Subsequent to this, and the circulation through the genre and on computer bulletin boards of the feedback I got a letter from Carolyn Cherry. Now, let me assure Mercedes Lackey and everyone else that Carolyn Cherry was not the writer of the original letter. No, you must look somewhere else for your alleged assassin. But Carolyn Cherry wrote this, and you all know who C.J. Cherry is. Her books are award winners: Hugo's, Nebula's, beyond reproach. A brilliant writer, and in fact, I believe someone who helped Mercedes Lackey. Harlan. We don't yet get the SF channel in our area, but we've heard about it secondhand and seen the much-quoted clip where you talk about the quality of SF turned out by female writers. SF looked to a sudden influx of women writers as talent who would, in their shiny new technological sophistication and supposed innate sensitivity, produce a golden age of literate, character-driven SF. SF got instead a glut of wish-fulfillment motivation, shallow characterization, and plots that rely on salute-the-cause political correctness in place of internal logic. We got technologically and historically illiterate books by women determined to recast the age of impalements, brandings, peasants, and overlords as some lost golden age, and determined to dismiss the future as a world they can't possibly comprehend. Right on, Harlan, right between the eyes. We try to do an honest job on this show. I'm very conscientious about it. I care about it. If every once in a while we savage someone, if every once in a while we gore someone, understand that we're not goring the person. It's the work. We're talking about the work. Always the work. If you take personal umbrage, you must understand that writers have to be able to handle it. And if you can't handle a little honest criticism, and I hope I've been fair in going over this for the third time, if you can't handle it, there's always planting trees on a hillside to serve the commonweal. Maybe I won't take the shot. Listen, this might be my last commentary. I was hired to do 26, and this is 26. I got a little problem, a little ethical problem, and I figured you ought to know about it. It seems to me that the people that you spend your time watching, whom you honor with your attention, whom you in some small way deify, ought to be fairly straight with you and ought to tell you where their weaknesses lie. A number of years ago, I was working on Twilight Zone, and I walked off the show. I did a show that was about racism and bigotry. CBS wouldn't shoot it. They said it would offend people. I said, who, the racists and bigots? If there weren't any racism or bigotry, we wouldn't have to do a show like this. Well, they didn't do it, and I said, that's it. I can't work for you. I can't work for people I can't respect. And I motored. Now, you got to understand something about me. Apart from this network and this channel, which hire me, I'm basically hardcore and employable, and I walked away from a $4,000 a week job. And I did it because, not because I'm such a great, honorable person, but because my gut would not let me stay there. I couldn't work there. Well, I now find that situation assailing me as regards this channel, which is owned by the USA Network. And it has something to do with the blurring of reality and fantasy, which is very much what we talk about on this show. What's real? What's imagined? You know, the Sci-Fi Buzz will show you the way they do special effects, and you'll see that it's not real. But when you go to a theater, you think it's real. In August, USA Network did a film about the relationship between Bobby Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe. Now, understand something. I have no brief one way or the other. I never knew Bobby Kennedy. I never knew Marilyn Monroe. I don't really care about it. I don't really care whether they went to bed or not. But I think that the movie they did was awful. I think it was miserable to do such a film because it put them in bed. No one knows whether they went to bed. And like many of these docudramas, they fabricated history. There was a piece, it's right here, it was in TV Guide. They asked the director, Brad May, who oddly enough was the director when I did Grandma, the Stephen King show on Twilight Zone. Brad May, that was his first job. I directed along with him there. Brad May says he saw nothing wrong with inventing things about historical figures for Marilyn and Bobby, her final affair. Quote, I think it's fair game. They're public figures. God knows it may be crossing the line a bit, but I think that's okay. You think that's okay? No, it's not okay, Brad. Now, Brad Kay's just a director. See, and most directors, I'm not Brad. Brad's a very nice man. I like Brad. But most directors have the intellectual capacity of an artichoke. But this was something that was done by the USA Network. Brad May was a hired gun. The actors who played in it, they were hired guns. This was put together by the USA Network by a guy named Tom Piscura and by his boss, who's been very nice to me, Dave Kennan. He's a lovely man. And I found it so offensive that I couldn't sleep. Several nights I just sat up, and finally my wife said to me, what's the matter? And I said, I got to leave the channel. She said, why? I said, because I can't respect them. I can't respect anybody who would do something as morally indefensible as that. And she said, you better call Barry Shulman. So I called Barry Shulman. I called Dick Crew, who's the producer of this show. Barry Shulman is the vice president in charge of programming. I told him what my problem was. Dick understood, and Barry understood. He understood well enough to say, what do you want to do about it? And I said, there's only one thing left to me to do. I said, I've got to leave the show. I mean, you're not going to change your policies at the USA Network. And then Barry Shulman said something to me that was very important. He said, you know, he said, your ethics are your ethics. He said, but if you hold to them 100%, you'll never be able to buy a pair of shoes because they have to kill cows to get them. You'll never be able to swat the mosquito on your arm that's sucking your blood because you can't take life. And he's right. You can go crazy with the ethics thing.
can go absolutely out of your mind. What you have to do, I guess, is go where your gut takes you. And you have to remember what's reality, you have to remember what's fantasy. And I said to Barry, why don't I just do a commentary about it? And he said, I'll go talk to the network, see what they say. And they came back and they said, okay. So I'm here, savaging my own network on probably what is the last commentary I will do. Who knows if they're going to re-up me. If it isn't shown, it won't matter because I won't be here anyhow. But I think you need to know that from time to time, this kind of stuff is bad. It's bad for people. It's bad for them not to know what's real. You got to know what's fantasy. You got to know what's reality. We deal in fantasy on this channel, but by God, we know what's reality.
Jarek, I come for you, Jarek.
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Hi, Harlan. Come on in here. Come on in here. How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Hey, nice shades, by the way. Very cool.
We big stars always wear these.
That's why I don't have any. You know, I just noticed in here in the script here that you are some kind of creative consultant.
No, conceptual
What,
consultant.
conceptual. What's so cool about that?
Well, the conceptual consultant is, in fact, the secret brain behind everything. No one can say a word that has not come from my conceptual thing, some stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I say, how's the thing with the Sci-Fi Channel going? The negotiations? Are you coming back?
They're done. Yes, in fact, the suspense is at an end. We are, in fact, merging again. You and I together again, darling. I will begin doing 16 more sooner than they wish to have me back.
Actually, I can tell you exactly when they're going to start.
You know?
3 weeks. Look what I found on the floor here. Talk about anniversaries and things like that. The 200th edition of Starlog. In it, they named 200 of sci-fi and fantasy's 200 most important people. One of the names is naturally our sci-fi buzz commentator, author Harlan Ellison. Another that you might not be so familiar with is Julius Schwartz. Now, when I met Julius Schwartz, he gave me one of these. Isn't it neat? It is a comic book trading card put out for famous creators of comic books. Well, we asked our very own Harlan Ellison to introduce us to Julius Schwartz.
For the last, I don't know, 35, 40 years, I have been friends with a man named Julius Schwartz. He hates being called Julius. Julie Schwartz. Fabled living legend, the DC editor who reinvented the Flash, Green Lantern, the Justice Society as the Justice League. Julie was a science fiction fan. Then he became a science fiction agent. And he was an agent from the years 1934 to 1944. And amazingly enough, this man, whom I am very touching now, this man was the first agent Ray Bradbury ever had. Tell us about your meeting with Ray Bradbury, Julie.
Well, there I was at the first World Science Fiction Convention in 1939. And this fellow, who I did not know, I may have heard of him, tapped me on the shoulder and said, I am going to be a writer and I want you to be my agent. But I said, my boy, I said, I only represent professionals. He said, someday I will be a professional. I'm willing to write a story a week until you sell one for me. I said, okay, go ahead and do it. Unfortunately, it took a little more than a year, but 1941, when I was about to leave for California with my friend Edmund Hamilton,
Yes.
I received a check for this Ray Bradbury. And rather than mail it, I figured we would drive there before the check would get there.
Who bought the story and how much was it?
Well, let me tell a little bit more.
This is television. This is not the theater. We haven't got three acts
I'm coming
here.
to the dramatic part.
All right.
So Ed and I arrived in Los Angeles, got a place to live, and we decided to go out and get something to eat. We were hungry. We walked down the street, and there's a young fellow selling newspapers on the corner. Hey, get your Los Angeles Times, get your Los Angeles Herald, as the car passes. And we look, and what is now known as a double or triple take, it's Ray Bradbury. So he rushed over, and I said, Ray, I have good news for you. I have a check for the first story you sold. I've sold, it was called The Pendulum. It sold to Super Science Stories and received 1/2 penny a word. I think the whole check came for $35.
$35.
Divided, he collaborated with, so I think I made about 74 cents on that deal.
That wasn't one of your big numbers.
That was the big, but it was the start of Ray Bradbury's career, and I sold his next 69 stories.
Now, okay, now it comes 1944, and you get a call from a buddy of yours, Mort Weisinger.
No, I got a call from one of my clients named Alfred Bester.
Was it Alfie Bester who got you in at D.C.?
Oh, absolutely. Alfred Bester was writing Green Lantern at the time. And he was writing comics because there weren't enough science fiction markets to earn a living. So as a consequence, as an agent, a 10%, I wasn't either. So he suggested I go down to All American Comics, which is sort of a branch of DC, and apply for the job. I protested. I said, I've never read a comic. I don't know what they're all about. He says, buy a few comics, read them, and go down. So I invested 30 cents.
That much?
I bought 3 comics. That's the only money I ever spent on comics in my life. 30 cents. But it paid dividends. I went down, was interviewed by Shelley Mayer, who was the editor-in-chief, and I was hired on that day, February 21st, 1944, and I've been there ever since. It's now my golden anniversary.
In the middle, was it in the middle 60s that you rebuilt the Silver Age?
1955 was the beginning of the Silver Age.
See, what had happened was there had been a lot of witch hunting and people saying comic books are bad for kids. There was a book called Seduction of the Innocent by Dr. Frederick Wortham, one of the great loonies of our time. There was the Kefauver crime hearings, and all of a sudden, the bottom fell out of comics, and there were no more superheroes, and there were no more crime comics, there were no more horror comics, and it was all very mild. A lot of companies went out of business. Many years later now, comes Julie at DC, and he says, I think I'm going to bring back these costumed heroes. He recreated The Flash.
No, first we're going to try it out.
Oh,
we
right.
had a magazine called Showcase, and if that issue sold, we know we had something. But here's the point that many of our viewers may not understand. When a magazine appears on a newsstand, we don't know how that magazine did till 4 or 5 months later. Now, if you printed the magazine on a regular monthly basis, you printed 5 magazines, and they all turned out to be a disaster. So we have a showcase. We try one issue, wait 4 months to see what happens. So showcase number 4 reintroduced the Flash. All I kept from the Flash was the title and the super speed. Everything else was different. 4 months later, 4 months later, we got the report, and so in showcase number 8, we had another Flash, showcase number 12, and so on. At that point, they said, let's go ahead and put out the Flash. It became a success, and they said, Julie, what would you like to try next?
Green
Well, a real
Lantern.
favorite of mine was Green Lantern,
Green Lantern.
especially since Alfred Bester wrote it, who got me into it. That proved to be a success with the change. I reintroduced the Justice Society of America, but I called it Justice League. Society is a terrible name. It sounds like a social club. A league, it's a baseball league, a football league, a basketball league. That proved to be a success, followed by the Hawkman and followed by the Atom.
All right, so now, Julie, my boy, we come through the mists of time. We come forward. This is your life. You were the Superman editor at DC for how many years?
Oh, about 16, from about 1971 to 1985, 86, I don't recall exactly.
How many times did you kill him off?
I never killed him off.
Hey, I didn't just fall off the turnip truck.
It
Schwartz.
may have seemed he was killed.
Oh,
But he had never died.
Oh, I see a cover that would say, in this issue, Superman dies. But he didn't really.
Apparently.
Apparently he died.
Because I started the story on page 1 and ended on page 23 usually, and the story was over, so
Right.
Superman had an unforeseen accident.
Right.
And everyone thought he was dead. At the end, we saw
He was not dead.
he was not dead.
Unlike
Even though at the end it said the end, but that did not apply to Superman. That applied to the story.
Right. Unlike
okay.
the current situation in which he was dead, but he's not dead. What's the finest moment you ever had in the world of science fiction?
Oh, God. Oh.
You can't think on your feet?
Well,
You're
I'm
a
sitting
living
down,
legend. A
obviously.
living legend
If
should
I was
think
standing
on
on my
its
feet, I've had so many great moments.
Okay.
All right, okay, here's the
Oh,
moment.
I figured we'd get it.
I was sitting in my office with Kate Swan and Murphy Anderson, who were doing my Superman. And Jeanette Kahn, who's the president of DC Comics, sent in her administrative assistant, as they call it now, and said, everyone into the conference room, this is very important, drop whatever you're doing. So I look at Murphy and I look at Kate, and we're all wondering, and I say, uh-oh, this is it.
You're all going to get canned.
Marvel has finally taken us over, or DC is going out of business. This is the worst moment of my life. And got into the room, and on a long table were 4 bottles of champagne. Boy, this is really the toasting us and sending us off in style. A few moments later, Jeanette Kahn comes in, holding a magazine clenched to her, and she announced to one and all that this is Julie's 70th birthday, and we prepared a surprise for him. And the surprise was this, and there's an issue of Superman in which I appear on the cover, and Superman is flying in with a birthday cake to wish me happy birthday. Well, I thought it was just a cover gag, but I turned the cover over, and the story is about me. So that, I guess, is certainly one of the super best moments of my life.
Tomorrow will mark another milestone for Julie Schwartz. He will celebrate 50 full years with DC Comics. Happy anniversary, Julie.
How do you like this? This is a still photo from the new movie, The Invasion of the Panda People. No, not really. What this is, folks, is what I looked like after I got smashed by the earthquake. Yeah, I'm back. Like they said in Poltergeist, he's back. Back again on Sci-Fi Buzz, back again doing the commentaries. But I'm wearing the dark glasses because we had a little problem out here in Los Angeles. A lot of people in the other parts of the country don't seem to understand quite what it was like. 4:31 in the morning on the 21st of January, I was sitting up here in my office on the second floor of the house working when the first temblor hit, the first burst of energy. The temblor came from out there. The fault line runs across the San Fernando Valley from the left, and it came here. It hit in two bursts of energy. When the first one hit, because I'd been through 5 earthquakes before, I was up and moving already. I got as far as over here when the second one hit, and the second one hit big because it didn't have any place else to go. It came across the valley, and it had to go somewhere else, and it came straight up through the damn mountain, and it lifted this house, and it held it in its hand like a giant, and it gargled. It shook that house for 19 seconds. You want to know what 19 seconds is, folks? Sit there and watch the sweep second hand of your clock. Watch it for 19 seconds. I got this far, the lights went out, pitch dark, I got thrown down the stairs, face first against this, then it bounced me off that and hit over here, and then after it bounced me here, it picked me up and threw me down this last flight, which I took on the fly, never touched it, did a flip in the air, landed upside down on my back right here, missed this by about 1.5 inches, which would have squashed my head like an eggshell, and then as I lay there, this on the wall came down. This was a very large painting, and as you can see from the nails pulling loose, it just ripped loose. This painting had a double wafer of glass. It fell and smashed and broke my nose, blacked both my eyes, gave me a concussion, and blood everywhere. I couldn't see a thing. It was pitch dark. Then, when I lay there, all of a sudden, every book up here in these racks, all of these nonfiction books came down on me. And all of the books on the railing came down. All of those you see on the table here, all of those were up there. Everything fell in on me and knocked me unconscious again. Well, when I came to, I managed to get up, blood all over the place, and in the dark, I dragged myself out of here. That's what it was like at 4:31 in the morning. Where we're sitting now, a month and a half later, used to be my porch. I now have the world's largest collection of glass shards. We figure we lost about 40–50% of everything we owned in the house. I wasn't the only one in the community. Richard Christian Matheson lost his entire house in the fire. People have lost their homes in the mudslides and the earthquake. And the people who helped us are amazing. I mean, guys came from as far away as Eugene, Oregon. Chris Rush, the editor of Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, she came down to help. And Dave Bischoff came down from Oregon. Ed Bryant from Colorado. Terry Dowling and his lady friend Nikki came all the way from Australia. And most impressive of all, after we went after her on this program, Mercedes Lackey, Misty Lackey from Tulsa, Oklahoma, came in, got down on her hands and knees, and washed floors. This is a wonderful community, the science fiction community. These people know each other, and they help each other in times of stress. I'm back. I'm back for 16 more of these wonderful commentaries, and just so it won't be a total waste and me complaining about the earthquake, I want to turn you on to a couple of items, because I've been away for a while. The first is a terrific labor of love done by a guy named Rick Norwood, Manuscript Press. What this is the reprints of all of the beautiful Hal Foster Prince Valiant strips done in full size with gorgeous, gorgeous layouts. It's about $150, but it's a wonderful thing to have. This is the 3rd volume. Here's another thing. This is the best new book I've read in years. You'll love it. Go get it. It's a book called The Woman Between the Worlds by a new writer named F. Gwynplaine McIntyre. It'll knock your socks off. Get it. I haven't enjoyed a book as much as this in years. Otto Penzler of Penzler Books, who used to be Mysterious Press, now he's just Penzler Books, is doing exact replicas of first editions of the great American mysteries. This is the first one, The Maltese Falcon, deckle-edged, the complete book exactly as it was originally published. And these are only $35 a shot. And if I may, Mindfields, the book I've done with Jacek Jurka, is finally out. And it's available. The publisher is Morpheus. Other than that, it's Harlan Ellison saying to you, when they say, "Did the earth move for you?" be careful what they mean.